Today's recipe is a soft pretzel. So this is one of those pretzels that sometimes you get that can be really, really big, like at a fair or an amusement park. They're soft and they usually have large chunks of salt on the top. Sometimes we eat them with mustard or cheese. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. So equipment-wise, what the assistant cook is going to need on their tray to get the ingredients, they are going to need 6 of our custard cups. 6, I only have 5. I need to learn how to count. Grab my last one. 6 custard cups. Okay, we are going to need the small liquid measuring cup. We are going to need our large mixing bowl. I'm using the white one with the rubber bottom. We will also need our measuring spoons. All right, so the assistant cook is gonna go up to the table. This recipe, you can go in any order, just making sure everything goes in the correct custard cup, bowl, or liquid measuring cup. So I'm gonna start first with the yeast, and the yeast is going to be in this container. And for this recipe, we're going to need 1 teaspoon. So we're going to look for the measuring spoon that is the 1 with the TSP, okay? And this has that mouth that is flat across the top opening. You're going to go in. You may have to adjust the yeast container a little bit to make sure the measuring spoon is filled to the top. You're going to drag it across that opening. This is gonna go into custard cup 1 by itself. Okay, then we are going to go ahead and go to our next ingredient, which is going to be our lukewarm water. We are going to get that in our liquid measuring cup when we get back to our kitchen. And we are going to be talking a little bit about water for a moment. We need to make sure when we get our water that it is lukewarm, meaning it is not as hot as maybe you would take a shower in, but it is not, or wash your hands, but it is not cold like you would go swimming in. So it's kind of that in-between state. And I will be having you guys call me over when you're ready to get your water so that I can test it to check to make sure the temperature is correct. All right, so we'll get that in a little bit and we'll wander back to that when we are the cook. So then the next thing I'm gonna need is a 4th cup of sugar, not cup of sugar, a 4th teaspoon. Oh my goodness, 4th teaspoon. 1/4 with a capital TSP. And the sugar acts as our food for our yeast. And our yeast, you may think, well, that seems weird that it has food, and it does, because yeast is a living organism and it needs food, and in this case, sugar, in order to respond and activate. All right, so I'm gonna put the sugar in its own custard cup 2. All right, then in my 3rd custard cup, the 3rd thing on the list is the coarse salt for topping. And for this, we are going to be using coarse sea salt. And we don't want a ton of salt, so I am going to use a teaspoon. Again, that 1/T1 and then a TSP. And drag it across. Doesn't have to be exact because it is for topping. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the 3rd custard cup, all on its own. My next ingredient is going to be the flour. Now the flour, we are going to need 2 cups of flour. And I did not get the dry measuring cup. So, I need my 1 cup dry. And again, you can use the blue plastic set or the metal set. And this has a 1 on it and then the word cup. So this is 1 cup and I need 2 cups of flour to go into the bowl. So my flour is over here. And remember, flour we have to spoon in. Okay, this will be on the demo table. It just was in my way for this demonstration. So I'm going to spoon till the cup is overflowing or heaping. We learned that word last week. And then I'm going to drag my spatula across the top to level it. And that is 1 cup of flour. And then I'm going to do the same thing to get 2 cups. Again, it's heaping. I take my spatula, drag it across the top to level it. This is my 2nd cup. All right, then our next ingredient is salt again, but this time, you guys, this is going to be just regular table salt. Okay, it has that same opening, and we are only going to be using 1/4 teaspoon. So that is the 1/4 followed by the abbreviation TSP. Okay, this one is going to go in its own custard cup 4. That beeping is my oven. It is preheated because that is the first thing the cook is going to do, is preheat their oven to 400 degrees. All right, next I'm going to need an egg. I'm going to put that in my 5th custard cup. And then the last thing I'm going to need is just some extra flour that I'm going to use for the cutting board. And by extra flour, all I mean is you are going to just take the spoon and spoon some in. We are not going to measure it. We're probably not going to use all of it either. You're also going to need to grab your knife and bring this back to your kitchen. Now, if you remember, we talked about the water. So I need to make sure that I get the water for the yeast. And so going back, my water amount that I need is 3/4 cup. So again, I'm going to locate it here on the small liquid measuring cup. Okay, it is the 2nd line down from the top. I'm going to come over to my kitchen sink, and I'm going to run the water for just a moment so it gets to that lukewarm temperature. And it's the heat that activates or kind of wakes the yeast up, and then it is the sugar that the yeast uses And remember, it has to be a flat surface at eye level for our water. Okay, so once that happens, very quickly, the the cook is going to go on to their directions. So they've already preheated the oven. The next thing they're going to do is add with the water, we're going to add the yeast and the sugar, okay, to a small mixing bowl. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the sugar in, and I'm going to add the yeast in. All right, and I am going to put that in, taking a fork, and I'm going to just kind of stir that together because we want to get it to dissolve. Now this recipe, we do not actually let the dough rise like we would for pizza dough or a calzone or other recipes usually that have yeast in it. And we'll be talking about that at the end of this video. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. It is all mixed together. I'm going to go on to direction 3. In a separate large mixing bowl, you are going to whisk together the flour and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Okay, so remember, you have 2 salts. Make sure you're using the smaller pieces of salt. That's just your regular table salt. So I'm going to shake that around, not dump it all in one spot, and then grab my whisk. Okay, and I'm going to just use the whisk and mix it together to make sure that salt gets mixed in. Okay, then we're going to make sure all that flour gets in. I'm going to then add the yeast, sugar, and water mixture to the flour and salt, giving it just a little spoon before we put it in. Remembering again, this whisk does not go in the sink. Okay, I'm going to use my large spoon, and now you're going to, as it says for direction 5, you are going to, using a spoon, you're going to mix this together. So again, this is just the flour, salt, water, yeast, and a little bit of sugar. Okay, so I'm just mixing this together with my spoon till it starts to form a dough ball. And then the next thing we're going to do, number 6, is we are going to knead this dough on a lightly floured surface or a cutting board. Okay, so I'm going to move that to the side. I'm going to grab my cutting board that I have just washed, okay, and it's a little damp on that side, so I'm going to flip it to my back side. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and get our flour, okay, our extra flour that we had, And I'm going to shake just a small amount onto the board and kind of rub that around. And then I am going to dump this onto my cutting board. Okay, if there's any dough that sticks to the sides, you can go ahead and scrape that in. Remember too, if you are the weight person, you should be washing your dishes as you go on this lab. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and knead my dough together. So I'm going to kind of push it all together, little pieces, and fold it to start. And then you'll be taking the palm of your hand and we'll be pressing it forward. We're not squeezing it, but you see how I'm getting it a little bit sticky. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add just a tiny bit more flour. Okay, and then I'm going to. Now, if this were a dough that we were making for bread, we would be talking about kneading and letting it rise and letting it rest. But with this recipe, we don't have to worry about that because again, we are not gonna let this dough rise. We will be making bread and we will be talking about what all of those key terms mean in another lab. All right, so I have gone ahead and mixed it together or kneaded it, and it is all together in one kind of ball. I've got a bit on my hand, so I'm gonna just scrape it into my trash can. The easiest way to do it is to rub your hands together. Rub your hands together to get all that extra dough off. Okay, so then number 8 says that you are going to, or excuse me, number 7, you are going to cut it into 3 or 4 pieces. Well, if you are a kitchen of 5, which some of ours are, you are going to want to cut it into 5 pieces. Okay, I am going to show you one for 4. Okay, so I'm going to start in the middle. Okay, I'm going to cut it in half there, here, and here. So now I have 4 pieces of dough. And I'm going to do the same thing with each of the pieces of dough. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, you're going to roll it into a thin twist or thin rope, and then we're going to twist it. So I'm going to show you the video for doing that now. Okay, so you're going to, once it's all in that long rope, all right, just like she showed in the video, we are going to make a U shape, right? Then we are going to cross them over so that we have a circle. And then we are going to cross or twist one more time. We are going to twist it over again so that we have that good twist here in the middle. And then I'm going to take my 2 ends and I'm going to flip everything up. Open that up just a little bit more and press it in. And now I have a pretzel shape. And you can see it's not the greatest shape, but it is good for our first pretzel. All right, prepare your pan as well. So you are going to be using just that cooking spray again. We're going to be using our baking sheet. Lightly spray, okay? And then we're going to place this down on the tray, and I am going to continue making my other ones. Do you want to just... All right, once the pretzels are shaped and are on your pan, you are going to, on step number 10, in a small mixing bowl, we are going to beat this egg with our plastic fork. And we're doing what is called an egg wash on the top of the pretzels. Okay, that is going to help form the crust or the outer layer of the pretzel. It's also going to help with our salt to stick. So again, I don't have to use a whisk. You can just use a fork to mix that yolk and the egg white together. All right, and then once it is mixed together and a little bit foamy, we are going to take our pastry brush, and we are going to lightly brush the egg wash, excuse me, across the pretzels. And just a little bit. You don't want to get egg on your actual pretzel and it come out like an egg sandwich. It's just a little brushing. And then we are going to be baking. We're going to sprinkle a little salt on these if you want. If you don't want salt, you do not have to. All right, and then remember that salt that we're using for this is that thick salt or that chunky salt. It's also called coarse. And you're going to be baking these for 18 to 15 minutes until they are brown, lightly brown. And that will be the end. I will show you what they look like.